Izuku silently sat down on the table, across from his mother. Both of his hands were together, thumbs overlapping each other as he tapped his foot on the floor. He had told his mother that he would explain everything to her, but the truth was, he didn't exactly know where to start. His mother seemed to recognize his trouble. "Don't worry, Aizu, if you don't want dash dot." Izuku let out a sigh. "No, no. It's okay, Mom. I probably should start from the beginning." Izuku looked down. "You remember, when I came back after having a run-in with a villain?" Inko nodded, prompting Izuku to continue. "That wasn't the only thing that happened." Izuku let out a breath. "I encountered something in the woods where me and Kakin used to play." He held a hand to his neck, rubbing it softly, deciding to leave that part out. "I don't know what it was. Only that it exposed me to something." His mother seemed to be listening intently despite the worry in her face. Izuku held out his hand, horizontally in front of his face, just as Anko did. "There are two worlds that apparently exist. One is the one we live in. And the other is." He pointed to the underside of his hand. "Of dreaming and impossibility. That's why my power isn't a quirk. It's just that I now exist between both of these worlds." Inko blinked. "Is it painful?" Izuku shook his head. "No." She seemed to look down though before looking back up. "And who told you all of this?" "A man named Anko." Izuku paused again. "He exists there, I think, in the void. The only reason I was able to talk to him was because I meditated at a temple." "You meditated?" Inko asked in surprise. Yeah." Izuku said with a tinge of awkwardness. "It was like an astral projection, I guess. My mind was somewhere else while my body remained here." His mother put her hands together. "And this Anko, can he be trusted?" Izuku slowly nodded. I think so. He didn't seem like a liar." Izuku then looked to the side, rubbing the back of his neck. "Besides, I'm not going to pass up an opportunity to learn. If I can master this power, I can not only keep it from hurting others, but I can also become a hero, Mom. Just like I always wanted to be." Inko seemed to stare at him for a moment before she let out a sigh. "I've done nothing but worry this entire time, while you've been finding ways to help yourself, Aizu." She looked away. "Some mother I am." He pushed himself up from his chair. That's not true, Mom. I know you tried to help." She looked back at him, smiling as she wiped a tear from her eye. "So, what happens now?" I can still try calling a quirk behaviorist dash. I don't think it would do any good." Izuku looked at his own hands before balling them into fists. "And the UA entrance exam is in 10 months. His mother gave a supporting smile. "Well, whatever choice it is, I'll support it to the best of my ability, Aizu. That is my promise to you." Izuku smiled, the words of his mother bringing comfort to his soul. "Then I better start training. A lot. Look up a few routines I could use in the gym. Possibly meditate from time to time. I wonder what's a good place to dash." He droned on and on before he heard his mother spoke up. "Aizu." Izuku looked up, his mother showing a nervous expression. "You're mumbling again." His face turned red. I guess I should probably write a plan then. He put a fist atop his palm in determination. Organize what I'll do, figure out what works. Make time for every activity. He walked down the hallway. I'll be right back, Mom. She sniffed, wiping away another reclusive tear. My little baby's all grown up. Katsuki sat with a hand holding up his head, staring out the window, his eyes narrowed. School had started a few hours ago, and so far he was absolutely stumped, mainly because Izuku had changed. Usually, whenever he would come into class, he would look as if the wind was ready to knock him down. Yet this morning, he had simply arrived, sat down, and immediately went to work, scribbling. What the hell is the nerd up to? Katsuki thought, peering to the side. Izuku seemed fully dedicated to his work now, eyes focused as he wrote line after line. It wasn't until the bell rung that Izuku immediately stood up, packing whatever book he had and stuffing into his bag, bolting within an instant. Katsuki merely sat there, turning his head back as he huffed. Fucking Deku. Izuku exited the residential district after changing into more suitable clothes at his house, continuing his walk onward. Today was the start of his training, and he had promised that he wasn't going to go easy on himself. Yesterday, he mapped out a few places he could potentially go to train. One was the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, but online he had read that the beach had turned into a junkyard, definitely not a preferable place even if he was hauling junk. So he went with the second best option, which was the Hoth Company stone quarry. Decades ago, Izuku remembered his grandparents telling him that the quarry was an important asset, as stone was turned into various forms of aggregate and hauled off to Tokyo. Yet when quirks came about, it was put out of commission as better sites were found by those with ground-related quirks. Now, however, it would be his training ground. He ducked low to squeeze through one of the broken fences. Noticing the feel of hard ground beneath his shoes and abandoned construction vehicles that had been left behind after the company shut down, Izuku opened one of his books, looking at the set of routines he had recorded off a website. Well, time to get started. He had first started with some stretches, then with a proper warm-up of doing a laps around the center of the quarry. Before long, he was well into his harsh routine, even doing 3 sets of 10 pull-ups on one of the construction vehicles, letting out strained breaths as he lifted himself off the back of it. Yet physical endurance wouldn't be the only thing Izuku would train. During a 5-minute break, he had came upon a giant stone slab that had been left in the open. All right, he rubbed his hands together, feeling the energy slowly build up within them. Now. He thrusted his palms forward, trying to use a void blast. A meager little cone shot out, brushing some of the dust off the surface of the stone. Izuku paused, letting out a sigh. Looks like Anko was definitely right about it being more difficult. At least it didn't seem dangerous at the moment, just very underwhelming. He balled his hands, his eyes narrowing in determination. Let's try that again. Izuku shot another blast, this time putting more form into it. Later, he would have to go check out a potential spot for training his void dash, a small pool of water that separated 2 platforms from each other. If he did the dash correctly, then he should be able to go over 6 meters, reaching the other side and avoiding the pool. Izuku? Why are your clothes dripping? His mother asked in surprise, her son giving her an embarrassed look when he had entered the apartment. Izuku let out pant after pant, water still clinging and soaking his exercise clothes. He made a mental note to bring fresh clothes just in case he fell short next time. I went for a swim. By accident. He then sniffed the air, the soreness of his muscles and the grumbling of his stomach. Dinner proceeded as normal, yet this time with Izuku practically wolfing down whatever his mother had cooked. He immediately went on to doing his homework before going off to bed, preparing for the next day. Eek! A lady screamed as a man wrenched her purse from her hands, the thief escaping the scene as the girl yelled out. Thief! I'd just been robbed. Another person ran up to her, wearing a white mask and bearing spiky white hair. A black vest was draped over him with no undershirt, and 2 revolver chambers could be seen on his arms. Don't worry, miss. I'll get that purse back for you. The hero then began to move, trying to catch up with the thief. A few passerbys recognized the hero, gawking at him. Whoa! It's Gunhead! He smiled behind his mask, yet kept his eyes sharp as he focused on chasing the thief, his Gatling quirk beginning to act up as he watched the man push a few bystanders in the way. Gunhead was momentarily slowed as he checked if the people were all right before continuing on, noticing the thief rapidly approach a corner. A student was waiting there, head down and unfocused on what was going on, the thief preparing to push the kid right on the street. Gunhead raised an arm. Hey you! Look out! The student turned his head, eyes widening. And then Gunhead saw the student's face shift, turning into that of pure focus and determination. The student performed a sweeping kick, tripping the thief before witnessing the student deliver a perfectly formed palm hand directly into the thief's chin, knocking the man out cold before had even hit ground. The student seemed to look at his own hands with shock as Gunhead caught up, looking at the student's handiwork. Wow! The student turned his head, noticing the hero as his eyes widened even further. Gee, Gunhead! The battle hero! The student then bowed his head in apology upon realizing that the hero was chasing the thief. Sorry. I didn't even mean to do that. Gunhead tilted his head, picking up the purse from the unconscious criminal. Well, first off, I think it'd be the stealing criminal that you should apologize to. And second of all, where did you learn those moves, young man? The green-haired student frowned and thought, I don't know actually. I just kind of reacted on instinct. As if on cue, the lady from before rounded the corner, a relieved look on her face. My purse. Thank you, hero. Gunhead handed it to her. Well, to be honest, Gunhead reached down, picking up the criminal with ease as he held the man up. You should thank this young man, miss. He was the one that stopped the thief in his tracks. She turned her head, bowing to Izuku. Then thank you too. Most of my mother's photos were in that purse. I would have lost those were it not for you. The young man nodded as the lady went on with her day, walking down the sidewalk. Gunhead produced a pair of handcuffs. I'm off to the police station. But before I go, Gunhead handed out a small card. I know it's not much, but I have a dojo that you may be interested to hone your skills at. He then shrugged. Someone whose simple reaction in a dangerous situation is to do a precisely timed leg sweep and a perfectly executed palm fist would probably feel at home. The student seemed to freeze up. Why you're inviting me? To train at your dojo? Gunhead nodded, walking away with the criminal in tow. Yeah. In the meanwhile, stay safe. Izuku stared at the card for a moment, shakily reaching into his bag before writing a new addition to his proposed independent training menu. And make sure to remember that the test is coming up soon. Izuku silently tapped the desk in thought, unsure of what to make of today. Gunhead, the actual pro hero Gunhead, had invited him to train at his dojo. Even today, he was unsure how exactly did he become some pro martial artist, as the void probably had nothing to do with that. But maybe the dreams did? Yet even so, the prospect of knowing martial arts without even having to train in the first place almost felt like cheating. Regardless, he wasn't going to take it for granted, he could probably learn something at the dojo. He shook his head, concentrating on his work. He couldn't afford to be distracted, as his control over the void was linked to his state of mind, as Anko told him. All right. Class dismissed. Homework is on page 40, I'll be having a quiz on that topic next week. Everyone groaned, with the exception of Izuku as he packed up his things, sitting up from the chair and walking out of the class. He was in the hallway now, walking on his lonesome, a few students streaming out of the other classes. First, he was going to the temple today, second he was going to check out the dojo, and third he had to keep exercising at the quarry. It was a sound plan and he had enough time to get back and complete his homework. Sounds like a plan. Deku. He stopped his thoughts, eyes wide as he kept his mouth shut. He remembered what Anko said about the man in the wall, the dangers attributed by the supernatural entity. Giving me the silent treatment? There was a pause. You break my heart, Deku. Izuku carried on, ignoring the voice in his head, resolving himself to keep moving forward. Little did he know that Katsuki watched from the doorway of his classroom, a frown on the teen's face. Urf. Izuku grunted out, his muscles straining as he did a pull-up upon the back of a dump truck. Almost there. He then let go, letting out a sigh of exhaustion. That was 35 in one go. He said to himself. Definitely an improvement. He turned his head, noticing the slab of concrete. Even though his body begged him to stop, he still kept going, panting out as he stood in front of the slab. Izuku put both his hands together before thrusting forward, a void blast engulfing the slab yet only serving to chip a few pieces off. He frowned, gritting his teeth. Come dash, he then thrusted both his arms forward, on. And then the slab was absolutely decimated, chunks of stone being blown off as teal energy went awry. Izuku paused before he let out a strange cheer, a smile on his face. But then his nose began to bleed, Izuku wiping the blood away as a brief headache passed through his head. A warning. At least I managed to destroy the slab. He then looked around, noticing the lack of slabs and the abundance of lumpy rocks sticking out of the ground. He looked at his right hand, clawing his digits. Guess it's time to make new ones. Kaneda-sama, I bought you some matcha powder from the market. Izuku announced as he bought a shopping bag into the temple. The monk looked up from his meditation, a smile on his face. Ah, thank you, Midoriya. Such a nice young man. The monk grasped onto the bag, placing it beside him. Are you here for meditation again? Izuku nodded as the monk chuckled. And how long has it been since you started? He paused, Izuku realizing something. 4 months had passed already. 4 months since he had acquired the power over the void. It had been proving to be a tough ride, and his dreams had actually improved. They were random now, often throwing terms he didn't understand or waking up and not remember what happened in it. But, if he were to be honest, he would say that something was holding its breath, as if waiting to unleash something horrible. Izuku often did his best to ignore that feeling, instead putting all his effort into the day ahead of him. Is that important? Mr. Kaneda laughed. Of course not. Come, sit. The monk stood up. I'm going to go make some of that tea that you gifted me. Izuku nodded, watching the monk leave as he found a cushion to sit down on, closing his eyes as he felt his mind shut down. It was like that for a while, Izuku not knowing if it was seconds or hours when he felt his senses return, the monk gently tapping his shoulder. Midoriya, it's been an hour. You may wish to head off to the dojo. Izuku nodded, standing back up as he bowed his head. Okay. Thanks for telling Mr. Kenda. He then proceeded out the temple, the monk waving at him as Izuku walked past the torii gate, breathing in and breathing out. He may have not have known what was going to happen, but he did know one thing. His life was happening, and it was happening now. Ha! Gunhead yelled as Izuku's face met the mat, the pro hero immediately backing up. Whoa! You okay there, Midoriya? Izuku nodded, wiping his cheek. Why yeah. Gunhead helped him up. Maybe I shouldn't go too hard on you. The student shook his head, stretching his arm. It's okay. I can take it. He was sure that Gunhead was smiling behind his mask. Alright then. Next time I'll keep that in mind. The hero then looked at the clock affixed on one of the walls. Some of my interns are gonna coming earlier today. I hate to say it, but you might need to clear out. Unless you want to join in on the class? Izuku froze before shaking his head again. I mean, I would love to, but Izuku sighed. Is it alright if I ask you something? Gunhead turned his head. Shoot. They both paused, Izuku letting out a strained groan as the hero chuckled. Oh okay, sorry. Ask your question. Why? Why did you invite me to train at your dojo all those months ago? For free? Izuku asked. I'm not a hero in training, I'm still just in junior high. That's a good question. Gunhead crossed his arms. First off, you're really no exception, Midoriya. I mean, you do realize that I teach interns that come here for free? But they take hero courses. Gunhead scratched the back of his head. That's hardly besides the point. Just because someone's taking a course in heroes doesn't mean I can't teach self-defense to other people besides heroes. Izuku nodded, albeit with a bit of uncertainty. And second, was that I saw a spark in you? Gunhead placed a hand on Midoriya's shoulder. When you took down that thief, I noticed that look you had. The type of look every hero has before he takes down a villain, that look saying, I'm going to stop this guy. I don't know if anyone's told you this, Midoriya. But you have so much potential. Izuku suppressed a shiver. If only Gunhead knew. Regardless, he was grateful for the pep talk. Months ago, Izuku would have never believed the notion of being taught martial arts by a pro hero. Okay. I understand. Izuku said as he looked away. Good. Now show me another open hand strike before we head off. Another 5 months passed. Izuku had extended his exercise period. Now instead of running laps around the quarry to warm up, he would instead run a circle around the entire residential district. While something like that would exhaust a normal person, they did not have the same commitment or training that Izuku had employed on himself. He had gotten stronger. Currently, he was jogging alongside the pier, a few fishermen sitting down and waiting for a bite. It wasn't long until he reached Dagoba Beach, the midday sun giving off a fierce glare. Izuku wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, drinking from a bottle of water before closing the cap. He walked to the edge, leaning against the pole. Dagoba Beach was surprisingly clean, not like what the online sources had said. The only garbage was only at the edge, while the most of the center held clean white sand. Maybe he should go for a swim? He entertained that idea before noticing a figure down at the edge of the beach, lugging what appeared to be a washing machine in both of his arms. Izuku's curiosity was stoked, walking down a few steps to reach ground level with the beach. Did they organize a clean-up? Yet, all Izuku could see was one person at the site. And then he got closer, recognizing a familiar cowlick haircut. Mirio. The UA student that saved him. Mirio. Izuku called out. The UA student turned his head, bland face momentarily surprised before showing a huge smile, dropping the washing machine to the ground. Hey! Izuku, right? Sorry, you didn't tell me, or I'll mite your last name last time we met. Izuku paused, scratching the back of his hair with embarrassment. Sorry. It's Midoriya. Izuku let out a relieved breath. Honestly, I didn't expect to see you again. What are you doing out here? Mirio shrugged, gesturing to the pile of garbage that was nearby. Cleaning up the beach, obviously. There can't be junk in a public place after all. Mirio exclaimed, holding his stature high as he picked up the washing machine again. Hold it with ease. Did you know that, originally, being a hero meant doing volunteer service? Izuku blinked, shaking his head. I actually didn't. Did they tell you that in UA? Mirio seemed to pause for a second. No. I learned it from someone else. He then threw the washing machine into another pile. Regardless, how have you been doing, Midoriya? Staying out of trouble? He marveled at Mirio's strength for a second. Mirio then let out a hearty laugh. Yes or no, it doesn't matter. He then pointed at his arm. It looks like you've been bulking up. Izuku looked at his own arm for a second, now showing signs of tough athletic muscles beneath the skin. It almost felt unreal to see his own body change from his scrawny self all those months ago. Yeah. Izuku narrowed his eyes in determination. I'm going to try for the entrance exam and get into UA. Mirio's smile grew to a tenfold. That's great. Can't wait to see you there. If I get in. Izuku shrugged. By the way, senpai. Izuku paused. Can I call you that? Mirio nodded, prompting him to continue. I've been meaning to ask, what exactly is your quirk? Oh, you're gonna love this. Mirio stretched his back. And then he fell, right through the sand as if nothing was there. Izuku's eyes widened in shock, running forward to see where he had went. the only evidence of Mirio even existing being his leftover clothes. A moment passed, Izuku watching with a wide stare. Mirio then seemingly teleported behind the washing machine, leaning against it. Hey, how's it going? Izuku blinked, thankful that the washing machine blocked the view of Mirio's more private parts as the UA student was completely naked again. Is your quirk teleportation? Mirio shook his head, close, but no cigar. He then put a hand atop the washing machine, his arm sinking into it as if nothing was there. It's permeation. I can become intangible, letting me travel through solid objects and the ground. That's insane! Izuku exclaimed. But how were you able to appear like that? Oh, that? Mirio pointed downward. I don't know the scientifics behind it, but all you need to know is that my quirk reacts in a weird way when I reactivate it underground. It's like the mass can't overlap on top of each other, so it shoots me back up. Best of all, I can adjust the angle and pose of my body to control where I pop up. Wow! Izuku said, but there has to be a drawback. Mirio nodded slowly. You're right. There is. Mirio looked down, grabbing his pants from the sand and slipping it on. When my quirk activates, no oxygen can come into my lungs because air passes through me. My eardrums don't even vibrate and my retinas catch no light. Not only that, but I still feel the sensation of falling. He crossed his arms. Even the simplest things like passing through a wall, for instance, needs an entire set of operations. So my quirk is strong because because you made it strong, Izuku said, deep in thought. Mirio smiled before tilting his head. By the way, Midoriya, what's your quirk? And my quirk? Izuku froze, realizing that he didn't know what to say. He was as quirkless as the day he was born, but now, it's not really that simple to explain. Mirio gave daring look. Try me. Izuku paused again. He wasn't sure if he should. But then again, Mirio saved his life. Whether or not Mirio believed it, that would be seen. I exist between a fold that lies between our world. Or in other words, I have extra-dimensional powers. As if to prove his point, Izuku opened his hand as calm teal energy developed within his palm. Mirio watched with fascination before Izuku closed it. But he sighed, that doesn't change the fact that I was born quirkless. Mirio blinked, a surprised look on his face. Izuku took that as an opportunity to continue. That day, when I bumped into you at the train station. That was when I became exposed to this power. He decidedly left out the part about being strangled. And it terrified me when I began accidentally using it the next day. Mirio paused. Did you find someone to consult you about this? Izuku shook his head. No. At least, no one in our world. Izuku then shook his head, ignoring Mirio's confused face. Like I said, it's really complicated. I would go more into detail, but I just don't know how. Mirio seemed to stare at Izuku for a moment. What can you do with it? Izuku shrugged. Many things. I can pull it up in my hands and use it like a blast, or concentrate it into a beam. I can even phase out of existence completely and perform a dash. I've been trying to master and train it. Izuku then looked up, remembering the time his nose began to bleed, or the fact that people almost got hurt when his power awoken. But even so, it's dangerous, versatile. Mirio finished for him. I wouldn't say that, Izuku said awkwardly. But I guess you're right. Mirio smiled again, whelp. Even if you weren't born with a quirk. Even if this power was something you randomly acquired. I'd say that you're doing a good job to make it your own. Why you think so? Izuku asked, an unasked question popping back up into his head. Then do you think I can become a hero? Mirio crossed his arms, honestly? If you asked me that months ago, when we first met. Mirio's smile died out, I wouldn't have known what to say. Izuku grimaced, yet he knew it was the cold truth. But now I do. He then gave a warm smile, Izuku Midoriya. You always had the opportunity to become a hero with the drive that you've shown. That drive could have easily gotten you placed as a policeman to keep criminals off the streets, or maybe even a doctor to save people's lives, both of which are heroes in their own right. But now, with the power fates granted you, adding the drive you always had, you can become a pro hero. Izuku gazed, wide-eyed. Mirio then picked up a piece of stray trash. Now if excuse me. I gotta clear off the other half of this pile before sundown. Do you need any help? Izuku asked. The UA student shook his head, nah. Besides, I promised someone I would do it myself. Just continue with your own training and pass that entrance exam. Mirio then stomped on a can, and maybe we might see each other again at some point. Izuku nodded, oh okay. Thank you, senpai. Don't mention it. The green-haired boy walked away, leaving Mirio to his own devices. A few minutes passed before the young man let out a breath, rubbing his hands together as he placed them at the base of a junk pile. All right. Let's try this again. One for all activated in Mirio's arms. 97, 98, 99. 100. Izuku announced, falling off the back of the dump truck after doing a full set of pull-ups. A few beads of sweat had settled on his head, the hard workout now being a walk in the park for the teenager. He came up to a few newly created slabs of rock, opening a water bottle and drinking from it. He placed it back down, clapping his hands together. You can do this. He encouraged himself. Izuku then thrusted his hands forward, a blast of void destroying the slab before him. However, he did not pause for a second, instead going on to the next slab as he clawed his hand and shot out a straight beam, running it through the midpoint. The second slab was cut in half before Izuku repeated void blast he did before, crumbling both halves into pebbles. He then turned away, running quickly to the right, reaching a slope that held a platform at the end of it. Now, Izuku thought as he reached the end of the platform. His form was immediately engulfed by the familiar tinge of energy before he rushed forward, straight over the water pool below as he landed at the other end. He let out a breath, blood beginning to come out of his nose, and a minor headache scraped at his skull. The teenager then shot both hands into the air, letting out a cheerful cry. Yes. Proud of you, Deku. Izuku froze up, his good mood now gone. Yet he didn't let the sinister voice complete crush him. The entrance exam was only a week away now, and he couldn't afford to be let down. He looked around the quarry, balling his hands into fists. Again. He simply said. A week passed. Today was the day. Izuku nervously walked on the sidewalk, hands glued to his backpack straps as he passed a gate. The location was huge, a giant glass building that looked reminiscent to a capital H. So this is UA? Izuku thought as he looked up at the building. Quite the spectacle, isn't it, Deku? Izuku shook his head, taking note that the voice today was more chatty than usual. He tried replaying Anko's instruction in his head, to give the voice no attention. Besides, he had other things to worry about, such as the test itself, for instance. UA was a number 1 school, so it came as no surprise that the acceptance rate was less than 1 in 300. He needed to be focused, determined, maybe even. Move aside, Deku. Izuku lifted his head in surprise, turning around to see Katsuki. Out of my way, or you're dead. Izuku didn't say anything as he blinked, simply stepping back to allow the delinquent to pass. Katsuki gave him a strange yet angered look for a split second before huffing to himself, walking past the green-haired teen. Izuku felt an uncharacteristic frown form on his face as he watched Katsuki's back. Next time, I won't be stepping out of the way for you, Kaken. That's what he wanted to say, but couldn't. Ever since that day, Katsuki had stopped tormenting him. For whatever reason, Izuku was unsure of. 2 other students recognized Katsuki, whispering to each other about the sludge incident. Izuku shook his head. He needed to worry about himself. The exam building was just ahead of him, and if you missed this step, then his dream of becoming a hero would be gone. Focus. Izuku thought to himself, 10 months. That's how long you've prepared for this moment. He took a step forward, keep that in dash. We prepared hard, right, Deku? The voice echoed as Izuku's eyes widened, his head throbbing. His concentration was completely lost as his back leg collided with the front, making his body fall forward. Images of his head cracking open and blood pooling at the ground began to surface. Only for something to wrap around his waist in a tight embrace, pulling him backwards onto his own 2 feet. Izuku stumbled for a split second, hands shaking as he felt himself over, checking for any damage only for his hands to come back slimy, as if someone had tracked spittle on his student uniform. A rather monotonous voice then spoke out, "That was pretty clumsy of you." He turned his head, noticing a girl that was a tiny bit shorter than he was, wearing a scarf and a schoolgirl's uniform. However, most stand out were the wide eyes the girl held, as well as a set of distinctive lower lashes. Her hair was the color of a green sea. Currently, she was giving him an emotionless look, with her posture and hands being slouched forward. Izuku paused, his mind incomplete upon the realization that a girl was actually talking to him. Regardless, you might want to clean off your clothes. I had to use my tongue to catch you. Tongue? Well, that explained the saliva. Izuku tried to speak, yet his words sputtered like fumes. TT thanks F for the CCA dash. You're welcome. The girl simply said, walking past him. He watched her walk away, revealing a cute little bow that her hair was tied into. Izuku's cheeks turned red. I talked to a girl. Good for you, Deku. The redness was scared away, replaced with dark foreboding. What do you want with me? He thought within himself. There was no response. Naomasa sat in his office, busily writing a record on All Might's arrests. He was good friends with the number one hero, and was one of the few who knew his secret, so it came as no surprise that he volunteered to fill out his work. He placed a file to the side, putting his pen down to take a sip of coffee as his secretary came in. Tsukachi-san. I received a call just now from the Park Ranger Association. They're on hold right now. Naomasa put down his coffee, thank you. I'll look into that right away. She nodded, leaving the detective to his own devices as he picked up a nearby phone, putting it to his ear. Hello, this is Detective Tsukachi speaking, how may I help? A voice spoke on the other end, trees? What about them? Naomasa asked. Another bot of dialogue sounded, vandalism? Well, you know some people. They go out into the forest to use their quirks out of the public eye. The voice on the other end continued, Naomasa now frowning. Clean cut? What do you mean by that? More speaking from behind the line, like Naomasa paused, like from a blade? There was agreement on the phone. Naomasa slowly turned his head, standing up from his seat to open a nearby cabinet. He retrieved a folder of an unsolved case, left 9 months prior due to the lack of info from the investigation. He then held the phone up to his ear again. Sorry, I'll definitely call you back about this. He then narrowed his eyes, and I promise you, we'll find out who's responsible.